My very first content video on this channel was on DIY piers, as this was one of the very first projects I undertook when getting into astrophotography. One thing I did not address in that video, because I didn't do it at the time, was the making of a pier adapter. This is what marries your mount to the pier. Because I cheated, I just took the top adapter from my tripod and used that instead. Now I've finally gotten around to making a proper pier adapter, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it and how you can do it for whichever mount you have. I'm Nugsy, this is Cheap-astro. Now, I can't praise my pier highly enough. It has been absolutely brilliant. My tripod was quite a wobbly one. You can get much better ones, but they're real expensive. You can otherwise build a cheap DIY pier. And I don't want to take away from my last video on this, because that goes into it all. But it seriously is, if you haven't looked into it, a really worthwhile upgrade for astrophotography. On my tripod, if I tap the telescope while looking at a really zoomed in Saturn and trying to film it, I timed the wobbles at 13 seconds. After the pier, those died down within 1 second. And that was only a 6-inch pier at the time. I've since upgraded my pier to a 10-inch pier. So basically, as long as you're not touching the scope, it's not vibrating. And a pier is quite a simple thing to build. Again, see the previous video, it goes into various constructions. But the pier adapter, as I said, I didn't go into. These pier adapters are readily available to buy, and a quick Google search earlier showed me a price range of £95 to £385. I'm sure they go higher than that as well. The one I made was absolutely free for me, and in the worst case scenario it'll still be cheap. Aside from the necessary tools and a lick of paint, all you're really going to need for this is a car brake disc, or brake rotor if you prefer. Luckily for me, next door is a motor mechanics workshop, and out the back of that workshop they have a big old skip full of scrap metal. So I asked if among this scrap metal might he have a brake rotor with a 60mm bore. So we went out, and I think the 5th or 6th disc we picked up, and they scattered all through this scrap, was spot on 60mm bore. So off I walked with a free brake disc. If you were to buy, well, you can't really buy one, you'd have to buy a pair. They might be 40-50 quid, I don't know. But you're already halfway to buying a pier adapter ready made. So yeah, source one from a motor mechanics. They will almost always have a scrap bin. Now, aside from itching to do at least something during this endless stretch of cloudy nights, the main reason I wanted to make this adapter was to free up the tripod head. A while ago I bought this PREQ mount from Ioptron. I got it cheap, did it up, made a video. You may or may not have seen it. Watch it. It has worked out to be considerably better for the weight of my 8-inch Newtonian. That's 10 kilos. Way too much for an EQ5, and it was too much for my old Sinter EQ5, or Skywatcher EQ5 if you like, which is now just sitting around doing nothing. It has nothing to mount it on, which is why I want that tripod head back, so I can put it back on the old tripod legs. I actually have 2 mounts, but only one is usable at the moment. So once I get that back onto the tripod, I can then in future maybe on-step it, or maybe I'm thinking of going something even cheaper than on-step for a portable rig for like wide shots with the DSLR, a light load. Anyway, that's for the future. For now, let's get into making this Pier adapter. So to start with, I've got to strip everything down off this Pier, remove that tripod head, and I'm left with just these steel plates. And the idea is that once that brake disc has been prepared, it'll sit atop this top plate and the mount will sit on that. Now it is important that underneath your disc you do have a base plate, or at least a strip of metal with a central hole, because that central hole you'll need to drive a bolt up through and screw it into the mount. You see, the disc on its own will not achieve this. So here I have the mount, the disc and the base plate all bolted together in order to mark exactly where I need to cut and drill. Now to do this, I've basically just spray painted in bright red paint, and just in case that paint's licked around the corners, I've also scored the lines, so I can't go wrong, you'd think. Next step, I take that apart and take it up to the workshop where I do all my cutting and drilling. Drilling first, I think. Now I here am using a pillar drill because I have access to it. It's not necessary, you can do this with a normal manual drill, but if you do have access to a pillar drill, all the better. Once I've got the first hole drilled, I put a bolt in through the two and then carefully center punch the other three holes, so I know I'm pretty well bang on. The next drill hole will be the opposite corner to the first one, and you may choose to only use 3 bolts in this. You fill your boots with measuring your angles on that one. I've gone for 1 in each corner, it's a bit more stable, not quite so easy to level up, but what does that matter? It's up to you, 3 or 4. So yeah, I've gone to the opposite corner and make sure those 2 bolts go in nicely before carrying on and drilling holes 3 and 4. After drilling, I realised that despite punching and measuring and making sure it's all okay, that not all the bolts lined up between each plate, so holes 3 and 4 I went back in with a bigger drill bit and made them a bit bigger, and this is going to make it easier for me to fit this. So holes done. Now I'm going to cut this to the square shape of my base plate. No need to do it, you can keep it circular if you like, but I'm doing so anyway. Once that's cut into mostly a square, I then turn my attention to the fact that it's a ventilated disc. It has 2 layers here, and there is no real reason that you'd have to cut any further. You could just use it as it is. I have chosen to take that top layer off, and my reasoning is that my mount, my pier, is already very attractive to spiders, and all these little holes around, it's just gonna be full of webs, and when they all have babies they're gonna infiltrate my scope, so I want this to be a bit more spider resistant. That's why I'm cutting now this ventilated disc down to a single layer, which then in turn takes a lot of grinding to get the bottom plate relatively flush. It doesn't have to be brilliant, it's up to you exactly how tidy you want to go with this. I want mine to be functional, but if you want a nice clean spray paint job at the end of it, you're going to have to put some work into tidying that nice and flat and polished smooth. So at the end of it I'm left with basically an unventilated brake disc, cut square, matching the base plate. I've taken any rough sharp edges off it, and I'm going to take it for a test fitting once I'm happy with everything fitting, spoiler alert, I wasn't. I had to elongate one of the holes for it to fit. The next thing, after lining this up and making sure it fits on the pier, is that I will need to put an additional bolt in the top of this for the azimuth adjustment peg. So I'm going to take the measure from my tripod head, so the centre of that, so the centre of that adjustment peg, so I've got 38mm or so, and I need to get the direction right as well. Now, luckily for me, in the top plate of my existing pier, where I had the tripod head mounted on there, that has left the paint marked exactly where it was, so I can see where the north side of that was facing. So I'm going to take a mark down there from across the centre and transfer that to the disc, measure 38mm or so out from the centre hole, mark exactly where that azimuth adjustment peg needs to be, and then I take it back up to the workshop and drill, this time just a 10mm hole for a 10mm bolt. I did tap that bolt, which was a little bit too easy, so it's not a very good tap, but it's good enough. I can get that bolt threaded in to the disc. I'll just need a nut now to secure it. You could do a bit of spot weld if you're that way inclined, but I thought then once I got the nut on that it's just too big. That might get in the way of the adjustment bolts. Therefore, I've put that in a vise and trimmed it down just half the width. I put that nut back on then, and again, this is rough work. I haven't taken it to a nice proper looking flat finish. This is going to be hidden under my mount. It just has to be functional. So it's keeping the bolt in without being too high. That's great. Now I can just turn this M10 bolt into the adjustment peg it's intended to be by flattening the sides out to give a surface for those adjustment bolts to act upon. So there we are, we have a nice squared off azimuth adjustment peg. But once you get there and that fits onto your pier, it's just time for a lick of paint. Obviously I've wire brushed this and dusted it down. It still looks rusty, but there's no surface rust, and I'm using a primer that you can paint straight onto rust to start with. A couple of coats of that. Following that, I've gone for a couple of coats of black paint. This is obviously metal paint, and I'm just using brush on stuff because my surface isn't prepared well enough to warrant spray painting. And while the paint dries, let's get myself a second mount up and running. Now with the tripod head freed up, it's going back onto the tripod legs. Nice simple job, 3 bolts. And then the old EQ5 can sit right back on top. Screw it up from underneath. Stick the counterweight bar on, and Bob's your uncle. Ready to go, albeit manual for the time being. Now that paint should be ready. It's a nice sunny day. Now before I put this back together, the extra thickness of the new adapter means I'm going to have to turn these nuts down so the top nuts can actually fit on the threads. Just got to remove these little covers for aesthetic purposes. Give those 5 turns each, and then I can put the bottom plate back on, followed by the new adapter, and then these nuts should screw all the way onto it. Perfect. Now I can sit the mount in its hole and do that bolt up from underneath, and we're done. May as well build up the whole rig again, just in case sometime this year I get a clear night and I can actually use this. I decided I'm going to load it up with the 200p I took the 130 PDS off. I fancy a change back to the big boy again. And I've fitted an autofocus motor on it, so I've to test and sort that. Once it's all loaded up and plugged in, give it a bit of a balance, and away you go. Now I hope this helps somebody, because there are a lot of videos out there that just point out they've made a Pier adapter from a brake disc. Not many go to actually show the whole process. If you found this helpful, informative, whatever, it won't hurt you in the slightest, but it will help me greatly if you just click that little thumbs up icon down below. Thank you very much. The more comments I get, the better. I always say this, but I need to. This is still a very small channel, despite my being most appreciative of my 3100 odd subscribers. Thank you all for subscribing, watching, liking, commenting, whatever you've done. And I'll hopefully see you soon with some actual images. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? I'm Nugsy, you've been watching Cheap-astro.